threats from the Kims of North Korea, threats to annihilate the imperialist aggressors, the American imperialist aggressors, they're nothing new. But are they more ominous now under this American president? That's where we start this afternoon with Professor Elliot Tepper from the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rob.
What is known about President Trump's policy on North Korea?
Well, what we know officially is two things. General Mattis went after the election, now Secretary of Defense Mattis, went to the region and said to the allies there, that is Japan and South Korea, we know that during the campaign there were some noises made that might make you feel U.S. won't keep its obligations. But yes, I'm here to tell you the U.S. will stand with you. So there are treaty obligations, and that's the anchor of American policy. Now we have Rex Tillerson there, the Secretary of State, kind of the low-key and almost invisible Secretary of State, making his first official visits there, saying two things. One is that the former Obama administration's officially announced strategy was strategic patience, and that era is now over. Strategic patience essentially meant that the United States was not going to respond all the time to each provocation, nor follow the pattern previously of offering aid in order to get them to come to the table, which they would then leave after a while and repeat the cycle. And Tillerson says that's off the table, but what's on the table, he said, is, well, anything's on the table, everything's on the table, suggesting that military option is now on the table. It's not really a major change. What's major about it is the tone and the total unpredictability, the unknown side of the Donald Trump new administration.
Okay. Does that mean that the American administration's patience has worn out with North Korea and these sorts of threats?
It means that the kind of demonstrated patience, which was official policy, is being withdrawn. But it doesn't mean that there's a whole new formal set of policy options which are now going to be implemented. Apparently, over the weekend, the president was in Mar-a-Lago, his Florida White House, having meetings about North Korea. So the latest test and the latest threats have been taken seriously by the new administration. It's not at all clear that they have a policy that can in any way change the situation.
Okay. So the latest statement, I gather, broadcast on the state network in Pyongyang, if one single bullet
yes.
crosses into our territory, we will nuke the United States of America.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
From land, sea, and air.
What do you make of that? How serious should we take that threat?
At the moment, they don't have the capability of doing so, but they do have perhaps up to 20 nuclear weapons. They do have the beginnings of a delivery system. They're making great progress in both testing of their weapons, perfecting their weapons, maybe miniaturizing the warhead, and in their delivery system. The key to all this, once again, comes back to really a trilateral relationship between the United States, China, and North Korea. The President of the United States, when he was running for office, said China could settle this issue with one phone call. And this is based on the perception that there is no other state other than China that has influence over North Korea. The military option really isn't a serious option because of a variety of factors. One of them is that Seoul, the capital of South Korea, is within artillery range, conventional artillery range, from artillery which is hardened into bunkers. The possibility of a military attack that would take out all of the nuclear capacity everywhere in North Korea is far too uncertain. So you can't be sure you'd get them all, and then certainly they would fire back with everything they've got. This would put Japan and South Korea in grave risk. All of that comes back to, well, then what can we do? And what we can do is hope that, and I've been saying this with you for many years, Rob, as you'll recall, we need a change in the calculus by China of their national interest. Right now it's clear that South Korea can get away with a lot of instability, a lot of threatening, a lot of behavior which is going to destabilize the region, because China says that it wants stability above all else, but it's quite clear they do not want the collapse of the North Korean regime. They are worried about refugees flooding in, and they are worried about having American troops right at their border, because North Korea, in effect, is like a buffer state. Until they change their reckoning and can maybe make a deal with this new president who's a deal maker, it's very hard to see a way out of the current situation, the status quo.
And how much diplomatic influence does China wield over North Korea right now? Has that eroded over time?
Well, what's publicly eroded is the close and familial relationship between the two regimes. We know that in previous regimes, the founding father Kim Il-sung and Jong-il had very good relations with Beijing, although those came and went. But the son, the new boy, Kim Jong-il, is really not in favor in Beijing. This has been made known publicly and privately. However, that doesn't mean that Beijing is actually changing its actual behavior regarding the North. To answer your question, it's always unclear, really. North Korea is not a satellite or puppet state of China. But at the same time, they get almost all of their energy from the North. They get a lot of the commerce, the few sources of income that comes into that country comes from China. So they're heavily dependent, North Korea, on China. China has said they're joining the international consensus on sanctions because they don't like all this testing, and they've made that known. So China's behaving very admirably as part of the international consensus that these tests must stop and the nuclear testing must stop, missile testing must stop. But therefore, they're cutting back on coal, they say. We know, however, that in the past, the sanctions aren't always scrupulously followed by China, nor do we have any idea of the full range of the potential intervention that China can make. I'm being subtle, Rob. The world has been waiting for is some indication that China will move toward regime change by using its influence inside North Korea to get rid of the regime which is creating such instability in the region as a threat. We know, however, that that possibility has been diminished because the closest thing they had to their man on the ground in Pyongyang, the uncle of the, at that point, new young leader, has been murdered by that young leader. So their key ally there that might have been able to have moderated or even arranged a replacement, they also had a plan B. China basically had in their back pocket an alternate ruler, and we know what happened to that. That alternate ruler was Kim Jong-nam, the elder brother, half-brother, of the current ruler. This is a dynasty. It's in their constitution, this communist state, that there's going to be a Kim family dynasty. There was an alternate ruler, possibly under, we know that he was under Chinese protection, but he's now been murdered in Malaysia. So that removes a pretender to the throne that China might have had as a possible lever, but that leaves us back to your opening question. What really can be done?
Yeah. I want to play you a little bit. This is live testimony happening right now in Washington at this extraordinary intel hearing on Capitol Hill. This is James Comey. Listen to this, Professor.
You can do things to help a foreign nation state, as I said, without realizing that you're dealing with, you think you're helping a buddy who's a researcher at a university in China, when what you're actually doing is passing information that ends up with the Chinese government. That's unwitting. I don't know whether it's the same as your implicit. Explicit would be, I'm sending this stuff to this researcher in China, and I'm doing it because I want to help the Chinese government, and I know he's hooked up with the Chinese government.
Admiral Rogers, would you give other examples of what you've witnessed in your career?
Sometimes U.S. individuals will be approached by other individuals connected with foreign connections who will misrepresent not just a researcher. They'll assume an identity, if you will. Hey, I want you to think that I'm actually working for a business, exploring a commercial interest, those kinds of things, create a relationship, and then it turns out...
That's Admiral Mike Rogers, and he's the director of the National Security Agency. So a very extraordinary hearing that's happening here. And the FBI director has confirmed now that the FBI is investigating Trump/Russia collusion. Mm-hmm. What's your reaction to this, Professor?
It's very interesting that we have reached a point where that has to be investigated. We have many instances now of knowledge apparently confirmed that the Russians tried to interfere in the American election, and that during that same period of time, there were numerous contacts between various representatives of the Trump campaign being in touch with the Russians, and that raises the possibility they were actually working together to destabilize in the case of Russia, destabilizing America's election. In the case of Trump, helping bring him to power by harming, as was clearly done, the Hillary Clinton campaign. I suspect that it's going to be very difficult to prove there was formal collusion. That's a pretty high standard, unless they've got tape saying, why don't you release that stuff to WikiLeaks, and that'll be very helpful to our campaign, which I doubt that would have happened. But what's interesting is that there are multiple investigations going on. It's reached a point where the kind of inexplicable relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin is under formal investigation.
Okay, good to hear from you, Professor. As always, thank you.
Certainly, Rob.
Yep, that's Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University.